Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack Dr. Chem's really comprehensive lecture on the precision and power of potentiometric titrations. Listen, if you've ever spent hours in an analytical lab squinting at a burette, just praying to catch that exact drop where a faint pink color finally appears, yeah, you know the frustrations of classic titrometry. Well, today we're taking a massive leap forward. We're going to explore exactly how modern analytical chemistry relies on electrical polarization to just completely remove human error from the equation. Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by moving beyond those visual indicators, then dive into acid-base and redox reactions, followed by precipitation and complexation. After that, we'll unpack the actual math behind finding the exact endpoint and wrap up with the overall potentiometric advantage. All right, let's jump into section 1, beyond visual indicators, moving to instruments. So automatic titrators basically swap out the flawed human eye and those fragile glass burettes for perfectly precise electrical measurements. Think about it. Say you're working with industrial chemicals or environmental water samples taken from groundwater leaching through rocks. Those solutions are almost always turbid, cloudy, or they just have their own inherent color. Trying to see a traditional color change indicator in a muddy solution, it's practically impossible. Potentiometric titration entirely bypasses this headache by tracking the changing chemical environment electrically. That means we can measure concentrations all the way down to the sub-ppm level with incredible accuracy. By taking the human eye out of the loop, we are essentially just reading voltage changes. As your titrant reacts with the analyte, the instrument measures the electromotive force, the changing potential, between a highly specialized indicator electrode and a stable reference electrode. It's happening in real time, it's dynamic, and here's the best part. Because little to no current actually passes through the sample, it doesn't disturb the very chemical reaction we're trying to observe. Moving right along to section 2, acid, base, and redox. We're talking protons and electrons here. Dr. Chem's lecture breaks things down into these 4 fundamental categories. To make it easy, we're going to group them logically based on their specific mechanics. We'll start with reactions that involve the transfer of protons. Those are our acid-base titrations. And then we'll shift gears to the transfer of electrons, which are the oxidation-reduction or redox titrations. Okay, so for acid-base reactions, we usually standardize our solutions using primary standards, right? Substances that have high purity and a high molar mass. Take potassium hydrogen phthalate, or KHP, for example. It's your classic monoprotic weak acid used to standardize bases. Now, by performing a potentiometric titration on KHP and mapping out that electric potential curve, we aren't just finding the concentration. We can actually determine key dissociation constants, like the K value, directly from our data. It's a really elegant 2-for-1. Now, in redox titrations, the landscape completely shifts over to electron transfer. A classic setup you might see, like the TIS-Fiway context, is measuring iron 2 with cerium 4. In this case, we have a platinum indicator electrode monitoring the solution. As the titration rolls along, the ratio of oxidized to reduced species is continuously changing. And these changes in the electromotive force, they correspond perfectly to the equivalent Nernst equations. Once you hit the equivalence point, the potentials of both the iron and cerium couples equalize, which creates a massive, highly measurable jump in the cell's potential. Again, 0 visual dye required. All right, section 3, precipitation and complexation. Time to look at solids and molecules. Precipitation titrations are absolutely crucial for environmental and industrial halide analysis, so your chlorides, bromides, and iodides. The old-school visual methods really struggle with mixtures of these because of co-precipitation errors. It gets messy fast. But with potentiometry, using specialized indicator electrodes, like, say, a solid-state polypyrrole film electrodeposited right onto pencil graphite, we can actually titrate a mixture of halides with silver nitrate simultaneously, and we get these perfectly separate, super sharp inflection breaks for every single one. Meanwhile, complexation titrations use tools like the copper ion selective electrode. By adding a copper complex, this setup lets us precisely figure out water hardness by quantifying calcium and magnesium, or even analyze heavy metal baths. And you guessed it, no messy dyes needed. That brings us to section 4, finding the exact endpoint. This is all about mathematical precision. If we plot the potential changes in millivolts against the volume of silver nitrate we've added to different halides, we get these distinctly different inflection breaks. And why is that? It's all because of their unique solubility products, their KSP values. Silver chloride has a totally different KSP than silver bromide, which means they precipitate out at entirely different points. This is exactly how an automatic titrator can tell them apart in a single mixture. It plots a stepped curve, where every step represents a different halide just dropping right out of the solution. And here it is, the classic sigmoidal S-curve we are always looking for in potentiometry. Instead of an analyst crossing their fingers, hoping to spot a faint color change and quickly writing down a burette volume, the instrument is mathematically hunting for the steepest part of this curve. Like in this specific graph, we see this huge leap in potential right at exactly 10.12 milliliters. But that begs the question, how does an automated machine actually know where the steepest microscopic point on that slope is? Well, to find that exact point, we bring in some calculus. The software takes your original S-curve data and computes the first derivative, which plots the rate of change. That instantly turns that steep slope into a very sharp spike, showing the maximum deflection. But it goes one step further to the second derivative. The second derivative measures the rate of change of the rate of change. Right at the true equivalence point, the second derivative completely changes sign, passing exactly through zero. By tracking this second derivative zero crossing using a finite difference approximation, the automatic titrator completely eliminates any guesswork. It mathematically pinpoints your true endpoint.
Finally, Section 5, the potentiometric advantage, focusing on modern laboratory tools.
To really bring this all together, we have to play matchmaker. We need to pair specific indicator electrodes to their corresponding reaction type. A glass electrode is going to pair with acid-base for your pH changes. A noble platinum electrode is what you want to measure electron potentials in redox, since it won't react itself. A silver electrode is the gold standard, or, well, silver standard, for dropping out halides in precipitation. And those specialized copper ion selective electrodes, they handle the intricate chelometric complexation methods. By pairing the exact right electrode with automated derivative calculations, modern labs are achieving unparalleled precision today. But, the science isn't perfectly resolved just yet. Taking derivatives inherently amplifies any electrical noise you might have in your signal. As researchers are quick to point out, hunting for that perfect second derivative zero crossing can actually cause meters to jump around erratically right near the endpoint because of all that amplified noise. And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to ponder. As automated titrators continue to evolve, how will advanced techniques like digital signal filtering, Savitsky-Golay curve smoothing, and Fourier transforms further shape the future of analytical chemistry? It's a really exciting frontier, and it proves that even the oldest analytical techniques are still ripe for digital innovation. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today, and as always, keep questioning the data.